600,000 Illinoisans work in manufacturing, and leaders at the Illinois Manufacturers Association are looking to grow that number.
That's right. And Illinois Capitol Bureau Chief Max Cotton takes a look at what they want to see lawmakers do to grow manufacturing in the land of Lincoln.
Illinois has all the natural attributes to be not only the manufacturing leader in the Midwest, but also globally. We have a skilled workforce. We have a comprehensive infrastructure system with roads, rail, air, and waterways. We have a world-class education system.
Illinois has a lot going for it, but IMA President and CEO Mark Denzler thinks we can do more. One major challenge: there aren't enough people going into manufacturing.
And without a strong workforce, our ability to grow and flourish is severely diminished. What we found is that we need to think creatively and holistically to help attract, retain, and grow a skilled workforce.
One creative idea is bringing manufacturing to high school students. A bipartisan bill would allow students to substitute their foreign language requirement with courses in career and technical education.
This allows those students who do not plan on attending college the flexibility to take courses that can get them working right after high school.
There are also proposals giving manufacturing companies tax credits to help pay for employees' student loans, as well as a scholarship program for students taking manufacturing classes at Illinois community colleges. Another priority is extending the state's research and development tax credit. It typically expires every 5 years. A proposal from State Senator Don DeWitt would modernize the credit and make it permanent.
Manufacturers and other innovators are planning, if they're worth their salt, are planning well beyond 5 years out, and Illinois' history of turning the credit on and off is harmful if we want to attract quantum, advanced manufacturing, biopharmaceuticals, and technology companies here to our state.
In addition to attracting new companies, DeWitt says it's important state legislators make the credit permanent to keep companies already doing business in Illinois. In Springfield, Max Cotton, WGEM News.